Welcome. We are reading and understanding the book of Revelation. Message and meaning. What does it say? Discerning a message, then asking the question, what does it mean? Believing that it is possible to read and understand the book of Revelation, remembering that there is a blessing pronounced on those who read and understand and apply. Let us begin by briefly putting our study in context, remembering where we have been. We begin with an introduction to the book, the first part of chapter 1, after which John receives the first vision of the book. He is in the Spirit, that becomes a key phrase, and a voice like a trumpet instructs him to write letters to 7 churches. This voice is part of the first vision, one like a son of man, described in chapter 1, and we then reread the letters in chapters 2 and 3. In chapter 4, the same voice from chapter 1 instructs John to come up here. John notes again that he is in the Spirit. This phrase is an internal marker or divider. So we see in the book 4 distinct visions. We begin to read the second vision. Chapters 4 and 5 describe a throne scene. The stage is being set for the rest of this apocalyptic vision, seals and trumpets. In chapters 4 through 11, the news that John must prophesy again, pointing us to the second part of this vision in chapters 12 through 16. After the throne scene of chapters 4 and 5, we read about 7 seals in chapters 6 through 8. You notice that I have used a different font color, noting where we begin our study today. 6 seals are opened in chapter 6. 4 horses are called forth. A parallel to Zechariah 6. We see martyrs under the altar in the 5th seal. We hear about an earthquake of God's wrath in the 6th seal. In chapter 7, John hears about 144,000. Here's the number, who are sealed by God and will be protected. He turns and sees an innumerable host, a great multitude around the throne in heaven that have come through great affliction. The 7th seal is opened in 8:1 and 2, and immediately reveals 7 angels with 7 trumpets. But we do get in the early verses of chapter 8 also a view into heaven before the trumpets sound. In chapters 8 through 11 are 7 trumpets of warning with comparisons to the 10 plagues of the Old Testament. Then we have 3 woes, that is the final 3 trumpets. The abyss is opened, leading to torment on those who dwell on the earth and do not have God's protection. Then troops are released from the Euphrates from the east, bringing plagues, but the evildoers remain impenitent. And the 7th trumpet sounds in chapter 11, verses 15 through 19, and we are again given a view of heaven. So we see a parallel. Before the sounding of the trumpets, after the 7th seal, we get a view of heaven. And then after the sounding of the 7th trumpet, we get a view of heaven preparing us for what is to come. But before the 7th trumpet sounds, we read about a second little open scroll and 2 witnesses. We will study in detail as we come to that part of the book. But again, these 2 subjects from chapters 10 through 11 clearly point us toward chapters 12 through 16. John must prophesy again. He must prophesy an additional message. So we come to our study in Revelation chapter 6, and we read about the opening of the 6 seals. To understand the 4 horses of the first 4 seals, we will compare Zechariah chapter 6. Then we will see martyrs under the altar, and in the 6th seal, an earthquake of God's wrath. Remember that it is the Lamb who has taken the scroll from the right hand of the one seated on the throne. The vision that began in chapter 4 and verse 1 is continuing. And one of the 4 living creatures around the throne of God says with a voice like thunder, "Come." Your translation may say go. The verb means either come or go, depending on perspective. And the 4 creatures call forth 4 horses, each of a different color, beginning with a white horse. That word means brilliant. The white horse is called and sent forth on the earth. the rider with a bow given a crown to go forth conquering. I think about Zechariah chapter 6 and verse 5. As the first century recipients of this letter began to hear about 4 horses that are white, red, or fiery, black, or inky, and pale, they certainly would have thought about the prophecy of Zechariah chapter 6, where we read of red horses, black horses, white horses, and dappled multicolored horses of a pale color. We will return to the Zechariah passage in our study of Revelation 7. On the second horse, red or fiery, a rider has a sword given power to take peace from the earth, usually characterized as war or conflict. With the third seal, the third living creature calls forth a black horse with a pair of scales in the hand of the rider. The emphasis in all of these, the symbolism, is on the color of the horse, not on the rider. But we do learn something from the description of the rider. Black represents famine and hunger. The description of the rider, or of the riders, as we think about all 4 horses, the description of the riders reinforces the color symbol. So white representing conquest, red representing war or conflict, black representing famine or hunger. With the 4th seal, remember the Lamb is opening the seals, we see a pale horse. The Greek word is chloros. It's chlorine-like, the yellow-green pale color, also of a bruise that is beginning to heal. It is the color of death. The rider's name is Death, and Hades follows. Hades, in this context, perhaps means the grave. This is personification. They are given authority to kill with sword, famine, pestilence, and wild beasts of the earth. So summarizing the first 4 seals, under divine sovereignty, the Lamb opens the seals, the 4 living creatures issue the orders. We see things happening in the world. The nature of the world is being impacted. The control, the commands are coming from divinity, from heaven, from the one who opens the seals, and from the orders of the 4 living creatures. The 5th seal now is opened and reveals souls, the souls of martyrs, under the altar, chapter 6 and verse 9. Those who had been slain for the word of God and for the witness of the testimony that they had borne. They have a question. How long before you will judge and avenge our blood against those who dwell on the earth? They are given white robes, but they are told to rest, for the number of their fellow servants, the brothers who are still to be killed, is not yet complete. So what have we seen? We have seen that as the Lamb opens a seal, all of this under the control of the Lamb, Jesus Christ, Christians, as we learned in the letters to the churches, are being killed for their witness, even as Jesus, the faithful witness, was killed. The question raised by the martyrs under the altar, those who have been killed for their testimony, those who have been killed for the witness that they have borne, they want to know how long. How long will this situation last? How long will the world continue to work against the advance of the gospel, the people of God who faithfully bear witness? Well, so with the 6th seal, opened by the Lamb, there is a great earthquake. The sun becomes black as sackcloth, the full moon like blood, the stars of the sky fell to the earth as a fig tree sheds its winter fruit when shaken by a gale. Interesting terminology. The sky vanishes like a scroll being rolled up, mountains and islands removed, the kings of the earth, the great ones, the generals, the rich, the powerful, everyone, not only the poor, also the rich, those who are powerful, the generals, they all hide themselves in caves. And I'm reminded of a similar prophecy in Isaiah chapter 2 and verse 19. The Lamb opens the 6th seal. We were reminded of Isaiah 2, the destruction of Judah and Jerusalem, a great earthquake when men hid in caves. In Isaiah 13, we read of the fall of Babylon, the sun darkened and the moon and the stars ceasing to shine. We read of the sky being rolled up in Isaiah 34, verse 4, referring to the conquest of Edom. Other Old Testament prophecies use similar language. Hosea describes the fall of Samaria. Northern kingdom people cry to the mountains to fall on them. The moon turns to blood, the sky is darkened, in a prophecy about the end of the Jewish age in Joel chapter 2. And we read of other Old Testament texts. As I read this passage, I think of those Old Testament texts. The earthquake is the first of 5 that are mentioned in the book, representing God's intervention and judgment on the earth. The passage that we're reading in the 6th seal very much depends on Old Testament imagery. But do not miss this point. Fall on us, hide us from the face of the one seated on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. Here is a plea for protection and deliverance. The earthquake is clearly a description of the wrath of God, the one seated on the throne, the wrath of the Lamb, and the question, who can escape? Well, we'll come to that in the next chapter, but some applications. Time will come to interpret. I'm going to continue for now simply overviewing. With the horseman riding across the stage, the focus is on the color of the horse. Christ reveals to the readers of the book that God is in control. God is on his throne. God is the one who controls the events of this world. There are those who are giving faithful witness, faithful testimony. They're being killed for that testimony, the testimony of Jesus. We do not need to get ahead of the story and speculate. We read with awareness, reading first century literature. What would the original recipients have been thinking about? What Old Testament prophecies come to bear on our understanding? In the nature of the world, God controls, and yet people still suffer. The people of God still suffer. Those under the altar want to know how long. That's the question of this part of the book of Revelation. How long before things are rectified, before God's people no longer suffer? How long before the opposition is defeated? Here's a plea for protection and deliverance and certainty. There's a lesson for us today. God is in control. His wrath will come on those who oppose him. As we live our life, we have a decision to make. Will we oppose him, or will we be on his side, even in the midst of difficulties and afflictions? I hope that you will choose, as I wish to choose, that we will be on God's side. And so a brief suggestion as we close for those using these studies, perhaps to read the text of Revelation, then watch the video study, and then read the text again. In our next study, we will come to chapter 7. May God bless you as you seek to read and to understand the book of Revelation.